Welcome. I guess this is our second Monday of session. So today in the Minerals Committee, we're going to finish up House Bill 131. We took testimony on Friday. We took all the testimony that was presented. Everybody had an opportunity to be heard. We closed testimony. We'll work the bill. Then we will move to House Bill 135. Which I believe is the general regulatory sandbox program. And then if we have time, we had a bill assigned to us late that I went ahead and noticed, which was 141. We'll see how things go when we get there. So a couple of announcements. So we have one member who is absent due to an illness. And I just have firmly believed that remote participation is just something I'm not in favor of, and it's at my discretion. And just being upfront with this, or anybody asking any questions, and I said, no, we won't have remote participation during the session by committee members. Furthermore, given the fast-paced nature of the session, and so far, we've only had 2 folks come in to testify remotely, but I'm also, and we'll have this notice, we won't have remote participation during the session. When we get back to interim, those rules change, of course. So we've made it 130 plus years of state in person, and I just prefer to stick to that tradition. So with that, we'll call the roll call, please.
Representative Bear,
Here.
Representative Burkhardt,
Here.
Representative Duncan,
Here.
Representative Aaron,
Here.
Representative Gray,
Here.
Representative Heiner,
Here.
Representative Sherwin,
She is excused.
thank you. Representative Western,
Here.
Chairman Greer.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, members, we're at that order of business for the committee's, what is the committee's pleasure, I guess, on House Bill 131.
Move the bill.
Okay, moved by Duncan, seconded by Bear. All right, I think what we'll do is we'll work this page by page. I understand that there was amendments after the testimony on Friday. People have worked through that, and then we can, after we work through the amendments, discuss the bill as we desire. Is that, I'm just kind of looking that will work with the committee. Okay. So with that, let's go ahead and go on page 1. Page 2. Yes, Representative Gray.
I would like to make an amendment on line 22.
Okay.
Add the word that utilizes Wyoming uranium.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Bear. Okay, discussion. Go ahead, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that if this is ultimately moved forward with, I think it's a travesty that it's not going to use Wyoming uranium. We hear that this is a tremendous boon to the state, but the enormous resources that we have in this state, it's not utilizing, and I think that's a problem. So I think that we add this in there, clarify that. I think they can get it done in that way. There's been a lot of articles I've read about them trying to ameliorate this problem. And I ask for an aye vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Yep. Representative Burkhardt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd speak against that amendment. It's like oil and gas. You don't know what the source is when it's produced. I know that the national lab in the state to our west is working on doing this, and they're recovering it from other fuel rods, some of it. There's no way to know exactly where the uranium came from, and to limit it, and this is where they keep the spent fuel rods under NRC rules. This would say that you're storing only fuel rods that came from Wyoming, and they could store other fuel rods. So I think it just confuses the whole issue and is unnecessary.
Okay, further discussion? Representative Bear.
I may be incorrect about this, but it seems that we're placing this amendment in the nuclear waste storage portion of the bill and the statute, but it really should be I'm thinking more likely in the latter part of the bill where we're dealing with the actual power plants. Just a thought there.
All right, any further discussion?
Chairman,
Yep, go ahead, Representative.
I think you can do it in either part. I mean, it doesn't, you can do it in either part. I just thought here was a place where grammatically it worked. And it doesn't say it's 100%. It says that utilizes. So it doesn't mean every single fuel rod has to be from Wyoming, but it's a sum is what it means.
Go ahead, Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly appreciate the spirit of this. We want our power plants to use resources, feedstocks from Wyoming, but there's just a ton of questions that I personally have. I mean, how does TerraPower currently supply their uranium? I assume it comes from Kazakhstan, as it does in most places, and is that even feasible in the time frame that we're talking about to build this and to use that Wyoming uranium? If it is, I think that's a valid discussion, but if not, I think we might putting the cart in front of the horse a little bit. I speak against it.
Representative Burkhart.
Mr. Chairman, just to continue what Representative Western said, right now there's one enrichment facility in the United States and they stockpile uranium from a variety of sources, Wyoming, Canada, states to our south, and that for enrichment. And then that goes to other facilities in other states to be turned into fuel pellets. Once it's all done, you don't know where the uranium came from. It's like the gasoline in your vehicle. While we produce a lot of oil in Wyoming, I can't say that I'm burning Wyoming gasoline in my truck.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, sensing you're ready for the question. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Amendments failed. Anything further on page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Keeping up with my own notes. Page 6? Yeah, Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would propose that we delete lines 4 through 6 on page 6.
Second.
It's been moved by Representative Heiner, seconded by Duncan. Okay, discussion. Go ahead, Representative Heiner.
This prevents the Industrial Siting Committee from permitting the ancillary equipment such as the steam turbines, all the other things that go along with the power plant, with the nuclear power plant, and the footprint of this proposed nuclear facility is clearly separated. Those that apply to nuclear portions of the plant versus the other more common portions. And so this would be an easy thing for the Industrial Siting Commission to review, similar to what we've done with other facilities throughout the state.
Okay, any further discussion, committee? Representative Burkhart.
Mr. Chairman, I would oppose that amendment, mainly because I think it's important to consider this project as a whole rather than starting to split it up into different categories. It's easier to do that. It keeps it whole. It keeps from doing two parallel tracks. The entire project is reviewed by the NRC, including other federal agencies such as U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Corps of Engineers when it comes to water, EPA. And in this particular project and potentially others in the future, it's all tied together. One of the interesting things with this project that we don't talk about much is the fact that it has the ability to store enough electricity, enough power to electricity that they can peak at 500 megawatts and fill in those gaps where they need additional power for the grid. And that is part of the what they call non-nuclear island, but the storage tanks for that power are going to be there. So it's all, to me, interwoven. And I think we need to leave that in and just do one complete analysis. And the NRC is in the best position to do that, considering the depth and knowledge that you need to evaluate all of this. So I would oppose that amendment.
Okay, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ooh, very loud, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We actually had testimony from the Department Environmental Quality that recommended that and industrial siding, that we do delete that section. So I had that in my notes. So I'm in favor of it.
Sorry, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just state that we don't know what the impact is going to be on the community. I think that citing bill really, I mean, the statutes and citing allow us to recover those costs for that community. And on top of that, the NRC allows us to do this. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman? I'd go back over to.
Go ahead, Representative.
I'm sorry. I apologize, Mr.
Just
Chairman.
kidding, yeah.
We all need to be a little more formal than we
No,
have been.
we're fine. Go ahead.
If you go back to page 5, at line 17E, that is already in statute. All we've said is shall apply only to the extent it doesn't interfere with the NRC's requirements. And that adds in also to that it includes the additional facilities. I mean, there'll be a warehouse, there'll be storage tanks, and all of that to me are all part of a unified approach to this project. And I don't think we need to be splitting the project into little pieces because we want to evaluate one part or another.
Okay, I think we understand. Jensen, you ready to vote? All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No,
Amendment's adopted. So Barbara, you've got that. So we're on page 6 and we'll delete lines 4 through 6. Am I correct? Okay. You're tracking, double tracking for me. Okay, anything else on line page 6? Getting a little bit of feedback. If you turn on, yeah, so I had to turn mine off and Representative Duncan was talking. Okay, page 7. Page 8. Okay. Then page 9. So Representative Sherwood did prepare an amendment. I understand someone was going to, okay, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this amendment starts on line 11. And we will reinstate the word test or at the end of that line. On line 12, reinstate the word demonstration. On line 13, reinstate licensed and then on line 14, after 35-11-2101, we begin the language prepared here, starting with until July 1st, 2035. As used in this subsection, quote, test or demonstration advanced nuclear reactor, end quote, means an advanced nuclear reactor that is either being evaluated for future commercial electricity production or has not commenced producing electricity for sale. This subsection is repealed effective July 1st, 2035.
Okay, is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Heiner. Okay, discussion on the amendment, proposed amendment? Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep, go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman.
Representative Burkhart.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would oppose this. We have a nascent industry looking at Wyoming to increase our economic base, provide jobs. And by doing this, what we're telling them is if you ever use this power plant to produce commercial power, you have to pay a fairly large tax that really has no basis in our tax laws. I've checked with the original sponsor that put that in there, and it was kind of a back of the envelope calculation. Additionally, test or demonstration is not really well defined. something that produces electricity commercially is no longer a test or a demonstration. I think that's a real negative way to define something. And then frankly, any of these reactors, I doubt there are two in the United States that are identical. You could claim every one is a test reactor or a demonstration project in some manner. I would really strongly push back on this.
Any further discussion? Representative Bear.
I would speak in support of the amendment. You know, I think that whether it's the $5 or some other amount of tax, that our predecessors were placing that tax on this industry for a reason, and it was to protect our number one revenue producer, and that's the coal industry. So I would speak in favor of this. I am for nuclear, so we're separating out what we call a demonstration plant, as was done in the previous in the act originally. So I believe this is the right measure to continue to protect our number one revenue source. Thank you.
Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to speak about the wording of this amendment. I'm not sure that this correct wording, but should this amendment go through, I will bring an amendment to the floor to reduce that $5 down to something more, what I feel is more reasonable tax. But the way that the statute is written right now creates some confusion for those that are trying to put this nuclear facility into the state of Wyoming. They believe that as long as for the extended life of the facility, which may be 30 to 60 years, they will be tax-free because it is a demonstration plant. And they also believe that that future ones may in some fashion be demonstration as well. And so they will never be subject to a tax for nuclear facilities. So I think we need to clear that up, whether we want them to be taxed or not. We need to make that crystal clear to them. And that may be something we need to treat in the future to make sure that we, as well as any company that comes into Wyoming, understands what the tax laws really will be for the duration of the project, not just the initial phase.
Okay. I agree with those comments wholeheartedly that, you know, we have to have a clear tax structure in place. If you recall during the interim, I think it was our meeting in Laramie, there was a motion brought forward to eliminate the tax on nuclear, on electricity is generated with nuclear energy. I did my best to shut that down at the time because we didn't have the backstory on it, why it was there. You know, and Co-Chair Anderson and I got the legislative history on that. And the legislative history is not very clear. It was really a compromise on a bill that came out that was trying to push forward and support small nuclear reactors. I'm troubled by the fact that we have $1 on wind energy. There's nothing on solar. We heavily tax coal that comes out and goes directly into electrical generation in the state and elsewhere. And so I think in the end, probably may not be necessarily this year, but we've got to have a clear identifiable tax policy that makes sense. So where we are right now, I'm more than comfortable with the exemption as written, but further work on this does need to be done for the state. So with that, any further comments, committee?
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify one thing, I don't think that what we're doing with nuclear power impacts as much as people may believe our other industries, coal, oil, gas. I think they're all mutually exclusive, but they can work together. We're looking at an opportunity for Wyoming, and I think leaving the language the way it is sets that expectation for companies who want to come in and start working on these power plants in Wyoming and work on the other technology that goes with them. I think we need to be inviting and not try to tax a new industry right off the bat to the point that companies are going to say, well, yeah, they talk low taxes, but here we're looking at a $5 megawatt tax. So I would leave the language the way it is and reject the amendment.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Those opposed?
No.
Let's go ahead and do a show of hands. All those in favor, raise your hand. Three, all those opposed? Okay, the amendment's not adopted. Anything further on page 9? Representative Gray?
Mr. Chairman, I've got an amendment a little earlier with your permission. Can I go back to page 3?
Yeah, it's fine.
Thank you. After line 19, I'd like to add on line 19, after the word facility, add the line and the number of jobs that will be filled by residents of the state of Wyoming. And to make that conforming, you have to also go,
I'm sorry.
Okay, oh, let's get it out and then we'll work the language just a little bit. So go ahead. I understand your concept. Okay, so it's there and where else?
after
Representative?
the words of facility, yeah, it's on page 6 too, line 18.
And so you're just looking, you want to know how many resident jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's important.
Is there a second? Sure. Is there a second? Yeah, Representative, okay, Lester. So this maybe work on the language just a little bit. So give me just a moment. So Representative Gray, so I'm looking at page 3, line 19, say, and what number of those jobs were filled by Wyoming residents? Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay, Representative Duncan, did you get that? Just a minute.
And what number of those jobs?
And what number of those jobs were filled
were filled by Wyoming?
by Wyoming residents? Okay, you good with that language, Representative Gray?
Since it's perspective, since it's 30 days before college.
Would be, okay. All right, I think we have the language discussion.
And this is the same on page
6.
6.
Page 6, line 18. Okay, discussion,
Mr. Chairman.
self-explanatory. Let me guess, you're opposed to the amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I am. We've had this discussion on other things on the floor about listing out resident jobs and resident things, and it becomes almost an indeterminate number. It's very difficult to predict. We could open any number of businesses in Wyoming where they may be filled initially by people from not within Wyoming. In fact, most of our coal mining jobs were done that way. People were recruited from all over the country to fill those jobs on the initial startup of the mines in Gillette and other places. I think it just adds confusion to the report and really isn't necessary.
Any further discussion? Representative Gray?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can tell you a lot of the suspicion in my community on this is that part of the placement of this so close to the Utah border is that it will not be Wyoming residents filling these jobs. And we hear over and over and over again that there's going to be a tremendous benefit to our state. Well, let's ask them to put in a report some indication of how many Wyoming jobs they're going to fill. They've done that in testimony before the committee. But I'd like to see something closer to the actual project and something also on paper so that if it doesn't happen, then we're able to come back and talk to them about that disintermediation between reality and what was actually said, which unfortunately in life, sometimes there is a disintermediation. So I think it's important for us to do this for our people and to confirm that in fact there are benefits for our state from this project. Thank you.
Further comment, discussion?
Mr. Chairman, again, I don't think it's a real number. If we just look at the employees who work for the state government, quite a few of them live out of state. In fact, we're even sending payroll checks as far away as Alaska to those people and pick out one industry for this. I just don't think is necessary. When you have state employees who are living in the states to the east and south of us, and actually, like I said, as far away as Alaska. So I don't think it gets us anything.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Representative Gray, and then we'll vote.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Mr. Chairman. Well, two wrongs don't make a right, and we shouldn't set ourselves to the lowest common denominator. I mean, I think that's troubling that we're sending checks to Alaska. I have a lot of questions about that. So I just think that we shouldn't set ourselves to a bar that is tremendously low. Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Let's go show of hands. All those in favor, raise your hand. Excuse me, the amendment is adopted. Okay, where were we? We went to page 9, so. Okay, there's nothing further with page 9. Okay, page 10, any further amendments? Okay, committee, any other amendments? All right, general discussion on the bill, comments? Sensing that the issue has been fairly well vetted by this group. Okay. Okay, Barb, roll call vote on House Bill 131.
Representative Bear,
No.
Representative Burkhart,
Aye.
Vice Chairwoman Duncan,
Aye.
Representative Air,
Aye.
Representative Gray,
No.
Representative Heiner.
Aye.
I don't have an absentee for sure. What
Correct.
do you?
Yes, she's excused. No.
Representative Western. Chairman Greer,
Aye.
6-2.
Okay, recommend do pass. 4 ayes by representative. I guess it's your bill, Representative. So,
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
okay. So the next we have Representative Andrew. There he is. House Bill 135, General Regulatory Sandbox Program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. To be respectful of your time and it's being a 31-page bill, I'll give you a very high-level overview and then kind of walk through the basic parts of it pretty quickly. This is a general regulatory sandbox program bill. And the idea behind it is that innovation moves much more quickly than government. And it can take quite a bit of time if someone wants to bring a bill to the legislature to try to change something. So they can test out a new offering of some sort of innovative product that they want to bring to the market. This would allow for a business with an innovative product to apply with the Wyoming Business Council for a short-term and limited exemption from specific laws that might prevent them from bringing their product to the market. And when the Business Council receives that, they would consult with whatever agency might be in charge of regulating the offering. They would recommend back to the Business Council if the application should be approved or not. The Business Council would make the initial approval and send it off to the SLID board for final approval or denial, so that we have elected officials making the final decision. Quickly walking through the bill, pages 1 through page 4, line 15 are just definitions. Pages 4, line 16 through page 5 are the duties of the council. Page 6 through page 7, line 5 are the administrative tasks of the council. Page 7, line 7 through page 10 are information an applicant is the information an applicant must provide during the application process. Pages 11, line 4 through 19 is the process for the council upon receipt of the application. Page 11, line 21 through page 13, line 17 is the process for the agency when referred the application. Page 13, line 19 through page 15, line 17 is the process for the agency. I already read that one. No, process for the council when after receiving the recommendation of the agency. Page 15, line 21 through page 16, line 14. Review and approval and denial process for the slip. Page 16, line 18.
What page?
16. Page 16, line 18 through 22 is exemption of products that fit into existing sandboxes, which includes the fintech sandbox and the medical device sandbox that Wyoming already has in our statutes. Page 17, line 10 through page 21, line 12 is the process for structuring an individual applicant's guidelines and limitations upon approval. Page 21.
Representative, I'm just going to interrupt just a little bit.
Okay.
So this go back to, so page 16, so it's availability of the regulatory sandbox. And so this act doesn't apply to what we've already got in place regarding financial products or services or innovative medical digital assessment products. These are two sandboxes that already exist. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And so then I'm just trying to say this availability, then we come down to the scope. So that's what I wanted to get to, the scope of the sandbox, right?
Mm.
And so is that tied back to then what we've got our products and then production methods? Is that what I'm understanding? Is that what you're looking at to try to find relief for regulation?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Basically, this would apply. I mean, anyone who came up with any innovative product outside of the sandboxes that we already have could bring an application. It doesn't necessarily mean they'll be approved. There's a lot of sideboards on this, but it essentially opens it up to anything.
Okay, so I always think in terms of, and I guess with the sideboards that are there, it probably doesn't matter, but I'm just thinking one example, and that one would be, land applying produced water for agricultural purposes and those types of techniques. Is that something that you would look at would apply here?
Yes.
Okay, so, but with that, if DEQ says no, because water quality is really important and there's a public health and all kinds of different things with it, then that means it won't happen unless, and they say the department said otherwise, or to find a mechanism.
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm just trying to get my mind around this. I understood very well how this worked with financial products and services and could relate to some examples. So that's all I was trying to look for, is just a little depth so I can understand what you're trying to get to, what problem you're trying to solve.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think we had you on page 17. Where I interrupted
all
you.
right.
Sorry.
Page 17, lines 1 through 8, the process for request of suspension by government agency. Page 17, lines 10 through page 21, line 12. Process for structuring an individual applicant's guidelines and limitations upon approval. Oh, that's where I was. Okay, sorry. Page 21, line 17 through page 24, line 10, consumer protection language. Page 24, line 12 through page 26, line 3, process for extending or ending the sandbox. Page 26, line 5 through page 26, 8 through page 28, line 6, reporting requirements for the applicant. Page 28, line 10 through page 29, line 10, reporting requirements for the council. Page 29, line 16 through page 30, line 15, conforming amendments. Page 30, line 21 through page 31, line 15, protection of trade secrets. Page 29, lines 7 through 9, rulemaking authority of the council in the slib. And page 31, lines 13 through 19, the effective date.
Okay, so Representative, looking at, just help me, how, so you've got a product, you've got regulation that's stepping in the way of the product. I'll just use the term product. It's product or process, is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So we have regulations stepping in the way of it moving forward. You go to the agency and agency says, hey, it's a good product, it's a good idea. We just have regulation right now that says that we can't. So you apply to the business council. And then we've got the mechanism where we look at consumer protection, we look at, environmental protection, all those types of things. And you find some middle ground, something that would work to allow the product to get demonstrated and gather further information, see what the regulations ought to be. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So they would bring it to the business council and they would provide quite a bit of information on what they were trying to do, what they were seeking to have to be exempt from, and quite a few acknowledgements that they would have to follow a certain structure. The business council would take that to the applicable agency or agencies, and they would have to make a recommendation on whether this was a reasonable thing to do or not. And it really is for very reasonable products or services that are just somewhat outside the scope of existing law. I mean, there's so many steps in here, nothing crazy or dangerous is going to get through this process. And, no one's not going to know that they're using something that's operating within the sandbox.
So what agencies do you foresee that would be applied to, where you would look at where we've already got the financial services covered? What other agencies are you looking at that would or someone would make an application and need relief or an exemption from regulation?
Mr. Chairman, it could really be any agency. I mean, that's what this bill is about, is making a way for products that we don't know about yet to come to the market. And by doing that, we're promoting efficiency in government and trying to cut red tape so that Wyoming can be the place for innovative products to come. I don't have a specific agency in mind that might use this the most. I think if there was one, maybe creating an industry specific sandbox for that at that point might be the best route, so it's more direct.
So, when we work, this committee works an awful lot with the Department of Environmental Quality, and it cuts across a lot of standards with us. They have strict compliance with federal laws in order to maintain the primacy. So is that an area that you would want them to jeopardize or look at, or am I worrying about something I don't need to worry about?
Mr. Chairman, it says in the bill, and I could find it, Actually, I flipped right to it on page 7, line 2 through 5. Shall not approve any application that would waive any law or regulation in violation of federal law, or that would jeopardize any national accreditation or other national standard for any state agency.
Okay. So I also think we're gonna hear testimony regarding insurance products to have those exempt from this. Any thought on that, down that path?
Mr. Chairman, because on the Senate side, we have an insurance sandbox in the works already, I think it would be fine to exempt them from this bill and let the insurance sandbox work its way through the process on its own.
Okay. So then I had one, sorry, committee, but I had another question. And it was regarding the application on page 11, when you look at line 4. So we're asking for the business council to turn to work this within 5 days, basically. I mean, I realize it's acknowledge of receipt and contact with the agency, but they're gonna have to figure out what agencies, what laws are there. And so that 5-day period seems like a pretty quick turnaround. And I don't see any consideration for the workload with them. Have you given that any thought or discussed that with them?
Mr. Chairman, they did not bring concerns to me about that particular number in our discussions. However, I do agree that 5 days is pretty short, and if someone wanted to bring an amendment to extend that, I would have no issue with it.
Okay. All right, those are my, Representative Bear. Thank you. Appreciate the answer my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Andrew, on page 18, at the top of the page, you give some of the scope here and you picked 12 months. Can you tell me what kind of thought went into the 12-month period, and do you see any issues with it being that period of time?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, a year just seems like a reasonable amount of time to demonstrate a product. The process for extending that is not very difficult either. So I think that's probably a reasonable amount of time.
Okay, Representative Bear.
Just one quick follow-up on that same page. You say that they need to demonstrate that they target consumers shall be residents of the state. I find that interesting and I like it, but is that too restrictive?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, the reason that we're doing this is that we can't necessarily make these exemptions for anyone who's out of state, which I kind of see what you're getting at. What if they're just in the state and not necessarily a resident? But I think the purpose of that is really to get at that this is for people in Wyoming, because that is where we are able to do these exemptions.
Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Andrew, to follow up with, I'm getting feedback. Maybe it's just me.
Sorry.
To follow up with Representative Bear on page 18, the 1 through 4 section. If I remember correctly, in our digital and in our fintech, and I think our medical tech sandboxes, it was up to 2 to 3 years so that they could prove that the product actually worked and was viable and was a business that could stand up. How is 12 months even viable to show that it's a viable business? Because most businesses, you don't know for until about your 3rd year whether they're even going to make it.
Go ahead, Representative.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Co-Chairman, I would certainly support an amendment if the committee would like to make that a longer period. I think that would be entirely reasonable.
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Andrews, can you give me, even if it's not a current future kind of product, but can you give me a product or a process that would have fit into this sandbox, to give an example for us of the type of innovations and things that, like when we were talking about the fintech one, we were talking about mobile deposits and things like that, how that was, advanced. Can you give me an example of something, a couple things that would fit into this sandbox?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Co-Chairman. I have an example that someone brought to me. Given that we might be exempting insurance, it might not be the best example. But last year during the session, there was a group trying to find some representative to amend an insurance type sandbox into some bill somewhere, which really wasn't possible. But they were trying to bring some company from the Cayman Islands that kind of was in blockchain and insurance. And I think that might be the reason we're considering an insurance sandbox now specifically. But if we had this and insurance was part of it, because it was in two areas where they needed a sandbox, they would be able to go through this process and bring that company to the US. And I think the only reason we would consider exempting insurance is because of the industry specific sandbox.
Yeah, go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a little more elaboration for me, please. Why would the insurance need the sandbox? What restrictive statutes do we have? What restrictions do we have currently that they can't utilize? And so why the necessity for a sandbox?
Mr. Chairman, Madam Co-Chairman, at the time they did not give me the specific regulations that they needed the exemption from. So I apologize, but I can't answer that question.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. We'll, if you just want to take a seat back there. Who all intends to testify on this? If I can just get just a show of hands, sort of. So we've got a couple agencies. Okay. Go ahead and come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity. My name is Jeff Root. I'm the insurance commissioner, and I appreciate acknowledging that you have the amendment before you that we were seeking. And just two quick points, and one you had brought up that there is an insurance sandbox bill specific to our agency that we'll be hearing at the noon recess across the hall today. And that involved quite a bit of thoughtful, deliberative process, keeping proper guardrails in place to protect consumers and to protect our standing as an insurance agency and with our accreditation. And as Representative Western can tell you, during those talks, we went long and hard to ensure that anything that came before us would not harm consumers and would not jeopardize our standing. And so when I saw this bill, I was rather surprised at first. And then I started thinking through some of the problems. And I'll just give you one more. I mean, I could give you a list of examples, but I will just give you one. We license insurance agents. The general sandbox deals with the licensures of people. So someone could come to the council and ask that they be licensed under the council path. I don't know what requirement they would like to see not adhered to, but they could do that. Well, one of the things we do when we license someone is there's a fingerprint card that we send to DCI, then goes to the FBI. And then it takes some time, but we get the results of that. And there's only 3 people in my office that are authorized to see those cards: myself, the deputy, and the licensing supervisor. We see if there's any felony convictions. And if there are felony convictions, then there's another requirement that takes time, that you have to get a waiver for certain felony convictions in order to sell insurance. This takes time. Now, in the example I gave you, we would not see that application until it's given to us by the council. And then we have 25 days under the bill. We can ask for additional 5 days under the bill. There's no way the results of the FBI background check would come, let alone if it did come, we would be able to get an exemption from it. And what's even more concerning is I couldn't even share that information with the council. Like I said, only 3 people in my office get to see that information. And we're actually inspected every 5 years, I believe, by the FBI to ensure that it's that closed hold and no one gets it. So with that, I appreciate the sentiment. I understand what they're trying to do here. But much like the FinTech Sandbox, I think we've worked hard on that, and I wouldn't want anything else out there other than that with the protections that we've ensured are in that bill. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, committee, any questions? All right, Commissioner, I appreciate you coming in. That's fine. Director Parfit, I think you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd Parfit, Director of the Department of Environmental Quality. I applaud the efforts to provide and promote innovation. However, we do have some concerns with the bill. I think you've raised some of those similar issues that I'll go through here. First off, the limited waivers of statutes and rules would be problematic for our delegated and primacy programs. This could result in federal agency overfile. So we may give the waiver, but the federal agency would overfile and regulate anyway. Or we could be subject to loss of the program. And this is true with both our oversight agency, the Environmental Protection Agency, and with the Office of Surface Mines under the Department of Interior. Now, one way to address that, the suggestion that I have is that on page 7, line 4, after the words jeopardize any, insert delegated or primacy program, comma, protections of public health and environment, comma. Moving on to page 11, line 21, we do have some concerns about, to a small degree, the potential impact on resources and priorities of permits under review. And this gets to the timeline. Timeline of 25 days would certainly probably be sufficient. However, if we fail to submit, then it equals a lack of objection. So that would be potentially problematic if we couldn't meet the 25 days for some reason. I don't expect a lot of these, but I don't really know how many of these types of sandbox applications would be needing review. And the other concern, particularly in air quality, is that some programs are fee funded. So if we take staff and put them on the task of reviewing these projects, we run into a challenge of how they bill their time because they're funded by fees that are permits that we're reviewing typically. Now, page 14, line 17, we suggest that waivers not be allowed for bonding and financial assurance for reclamation or cleanup. And we've got some experience with this with some projects on demonstration projects in the past. So we would strongly encourage not allowing the waiver of financial assurance requirements. On page 19, line 7, again, this paragraph may conflict with federally delegated or primacy programs that require public notice and participation, because we're talking for a period of 12 to 24 months on these projects. Now, if the provisions of page 7, line 4 are remedied, then this may not be a problem. And then lastly, just wanted to point out that page 20, line 1, even though I think I mentioned this for DEQ delegated or primacy programs, EPA could overfile and take a federal action if we don't take an appropriate action or an enforcement action. Again, this could be remedied if page 7, line 4 is amended as previously discussed. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Committee, any questions? Okay, thank you, Director. Did the Business Council want to comment? Okay, so then we've got, I'm probably gonna say this name, Reese Empey. If you would bring him in, and then we'll have Ms. Glancy come on up and test. Go ahead and come on up, Cindy, while we're getting him brought in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll keep my comments brief. And Madam Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Cindy Delancey, and I'm with the Wyoming Business Alliance. And House Bill 135 is, I believe, an effort to try to open the regulatory scheme up to continue Wyoming's approach to be business friendly. So my members really stand in support of this concept, especially looking at what has happened with our friends to the west of us. In Utah, they have passed a similar statutory scheme as what's being proposed here. And it's gone really well there. I believe that Representative Andrews' intention here is to avoid specific carve outs for financial sandbox, insurance sandbox, trying to open up more of a broad-based sandbox that's accessible to all business and industry in Wyoming, while trying to strike that balance with having some sideboards so it's not just a free-for-all. So as much as we love the concept and want to see, business be able to have these opportunities for innovation and efficiency, from what I'm hearing from other testimony before the committee, perhaps maybe this might be something to explore during the interim. Maybe some more work needs to be done on developing this type of concept, but just wanted to applaud Representative Andrew for his approach. We know that all of you are champions for business on this committee, and if anybody can get this figured out in a way that makes sense, it would be you all. So appreciate that and happy to stand for questions.
Okay, any questions, committee? Okay. And then we do have one signed up. Okay, if we bring him in, that'd be fine. Okay, looks like you're on mute. So if you come off mute, introduce yourself. Welcome to the Minerals Committee.
Chairman Greer and members of the Minerals Business and Economic Development Committee, I appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony today. My name is Reese Empey, and I am the Director of State Government Affairs at Libertas Institute, a nonprofit think tank based in Utah, and regulatory sandboxes are something we've worked extensively on inside and outside of Utah. Now, in short, a regulatory sandbox enables innovators, businesses, both big and small, old and new, to work with regulators and the legislature in trialing new products, services, and business models, while regulations inapplicable to their idea are temporarily waived. And at the same time, consumer protection is critical, because an idea that will obviously hurt consumers won't make it past the application process, and regulators, while the trial is taking place, keep an eye on businesses in the sandbox. And at the same time, businesses aren't immune from being held civilly liable if there is harm. This concept began in 2014 when the United Kingdom launched the world's first sandbox in targeted financial technologies, or fintech, which Wyoming accomplished in 2019. Excuse me. Shortly after, countries such as Singapore, Australia, Japan, and several others began implementing sandboxes of their own, while expanding the concept's application to other industries. Now, stateside in 2018, Arizona passed the United States' first sandbox, which targeted fintech, and something very similar happened. States such as Vermont, Kentucky, Utah, Hawaii, Wyoming, Florida, and several others implemented sandboxes of their own and explored ways to expand the concept's application to other industries such as insurance, healthcare, agriculture technologies, energy technologies, legal services, and property technologies. In Utah, we've worked on 4 different sandboxes. The state legislature overwhelmingly passed a fintech sandbox in 2019, an insurance sandbox in 2020, which is also the year our state Supreme Court launched a legal services sandbox. And lastly, as a result of other industries wanting to take advantage of a sandbox, the state legislature unanimously passed a universal sandbox in 2021, which applies to any and all industries. At Libertas, we're such fans of sandboxes because it invites the business community to the table, so they can highlight troublesome regulations while working with regulators and legislators to update the state's regulatory code to better welcome the innovations of tomorrow. And we're happy to see that Wyoming is taking a look at a universal sandbox rather than picking specific industries to implement this flexible regulatory framework in, because it offers the opportunity for innovations of all types to thrive and for these sandbox states to share these innovations in the sandboxes through reciprocity agreements with other states running similar programs. Again, thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Committee, any questions? Okay, looks like you get off easy. All right, thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Okay,
Thank you.
anyone else wishes? Did you, Representative Henderson, did you? Okay. Anyone else? Representative Williams, you want to come up and join us? Okay. All right, nobody, seeing no one else, we'll go ahead and close public testimony. What is the committee's pleasure? It's moved by Duncan. Is there a second? Second by Western. Okay. Go ahead and work this bill then. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Okay, page 7. Representative Burkhart. Representative Duncan.
We have one, but I didn't catch all of it.
Director Parfit, could you restate your proposed language for page 7, line 3 for us?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the language would be adding after the words jeopardize any delegated or primacy program, comma, protections of public health and environment, comma.
That's programs for the protection of?
Mr. Chairman, that would be correct.
Okay. Okay. Did you get that, Representative Duncan?
No.
One more time. Okay. So it's line 4 that would jeopardize any delegation or primacy program for the protection of. Okay.
Protection of public health and environment.
Okay, thank you. So Chair to entertain a motion to that extent. Okay, Representative Air, is there a second? Second, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the amendment is adopted. Okay. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Yep. Representative Western.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to amend on line 4, that time frame. And before I specify date, is there any suggestion in terms of 25 days, 45 days, et cetera? Let's go ahead and say 45.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Any further amendments? Yeah, Representative Bear.
Well, if we do that, we need to do something with line 21 as well. I open the suggestions on that time frame as well.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
I would suggest 90 days. Just, it's a round number. I have no real reason for it. If we, increase it by the same number by 5, I think that's way too long, 125 days. We increased line 4 by a factor of 9. Actually, that'd be 9. I don't think that's appropriate. And I would just pick 90 days to be somewhat consistent with other statutes. That's all.
90 business days.
90 business days. I have no real basis or logic for that
I
number.
would shorten it to 60.
That's fine.
Okay, so we have a motion for 60 days, and by Representative Air. And second by Burkhart. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay, is there any discussion? Committee, can we turn off? Just
Sorry.
a little bit. So as a general rule, when you're under 10 days, you say business days. When you're over, you just say days. Okay. So it would be a friendly amendment, and it would also have to go up on line 4 and get rid of business days as well. The committee, okay.
Agreed.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that is adopted. Page 12. Page 13. Representative.
Mr. Chairman, just kind of maybe a question and comment. Department of Environmental Quality made some suggestions concerning fee-funded programs. And I'm not sure how to weave that in here. Maybe that should be maybe I'll consider that as a floor amendment.
Okay.
I just wanted to bring that up unless somebody had some notes they had taken down to address that issue. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna go a little bit. Okay, so 13, page 14, 15, then page 16. Representative Air.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move the amendment as proposed by the Department of Insurance there on page 16, line 22, after line 22.
Yep. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Burkhart. Discussion? Okay, so the amendment would be on page 16. So it'd be after line 22. Basically, it's exempting the insurance statute or title. And I understand the sponsor was fine with that as well. So, okay. Any further?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that one, looking at the proposed amendment, I'm never mind, my misunderstanding.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment is adopted. Okay, we'll go a little quicker now. Page 17, 18, 18. Representative Duncan.
Mr. Chairman, I'm concerned about the Sandbox participant only having 12 months after the day of which the application is approved. In the other two, we do at least 2 years, so I'm either amendable to either 2 or 3 years. I'm up for suggestions.
Need you to have, once you make a motion for 2 years.
I'll
we
do
can
a
discuss.
motion for 2 years.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bear. I'm sorry. He beat you to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Any discussion? Okay. So we would, the wording on that then would be 24 months. Is that how we would do that? Okay. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that amendment is adopted. Okay. Page 19, 20, 21.
Mr. Chairman, can we go back? Sorry, page 18 still. I'd like to move line 19 and 10 to be struck. I mean, 9 and 10, sorry, to be struck.
Seconded by Bear. Okay, that's removing the target consumers that shall be residents of the state. Okay. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That amendment is adopted. Okay, I'm going to try to go fast. 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. Okay, 30, 31. Are there any amendments I missed going through so fast? Okay. All right, any further discussion on the bill committee? Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a great idea. And I applaud the bringer of this bill. I'm all for streamlining regulations. When we did the FinTech Sandbox and the others that we've done, we did an interim study. We spent a lot of time. I just feel like there's too much in here for us to digest in one meeting. And I think we should make it an interim topic and study it a little further before we enact it.
Any further discussion? Okay, no
Mr.
discussion.
Chairman.
Roll call vote on House Bill 135.
Representative Bear,
Aye.
Representative Burkhart,
No.
Vice Chairman Duncan. Aye. Representative Air.
No.
Representative Gray voted aye absentee. Representative Heiner. No vote for Sherwood. Representative Western. Chairman Greer.
No. Okay, so that is recommended to pass with amendments. Okay, thank you, Representative. Appreciate it. Okay. Let's see, we've got about 15 minutes. So what we may do is go ahead and have Representative Haroldson. We'll present your bill, then we'll keep it over and take testimony on it on Wednesday. I don't have a big stack in my drawer, and we'll set it up for public testimony first thing on Wednesday, but just go ahead and have you walk us through what you're doing.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. So what we have before you in House Bill 141 is actually a follow-up to a bill you saw last year, House Bill 207. And that House Bill 207 did, we need to understand that to understand this, is it put $1.2 million into an account for the governor's use for breach of commerce clause. So when a state were to bring an unconstitutional infringement upon our ability to either export coal or coal-fired electricity, we had a $1.2 million allocation given to the governor that he could bring lawsuit against any state that breached that. In this interim, we had a conversation with the governor's office and said, how have we used that money? What's the status of this money? We don't want just another coffee can of money sitting out there. And he said, honestly, the pressure from states has released a little bit. We haven't been seeing a lot of issues. I don't know if, I mean, we could sit there and say it was because of this bill. Probably wasn't, but it might have been. But I said, okay, so now we have $1.2 million. What can we do with that money that's actually going to help our industry? And their office, as well as a number of other entities, said if that could be opened up or broadened to be able to be used for federal overreach as well as third-party overreach. And so that's where House Bill 141 was birthed. And I'm going to jump onto page 2, section 2, starting in line 1, and it's going through and talking about that appropriations of the $1.2 million. And in line 5, we're adding in on that line, intervening in defending, and then down in 6, the federal government and its agencies. So we're just bringing that verbiage in there that states that we could take this money and it could be used against federal overreach, which we have seen over the last year, some pretty extensive federal overreach. And then going down into line 9, just some of that cleanup. And then it also says by the federal government, line 10, other states or third parties. And so the third parties would be environmentalist groups and other groups of that nature that may bring suit against our coal industry or our coal-fired power plants and that industry. We had a regional haze suit that affected my county a number of years back. This would be an area where the governor would have the ability to move on behalf of our industry and bring suit against third-party entities. So, and then it goes down into line 14 and it kind of just talks about that it would be used for not only coal fire electricity generation, but then also it goes through and it talks about for just our coal industry and the exportation of our coal industry. So it's pretty simple. We're just opening up the boundaries, so to speak, of what this money could be used for. There's no new allocation. And so I believe it's pretty straightforward. Questions from the committee?
Okay, so before we ask questions, I do want to, anybody in the audience that's here to testify on this that cannot be here on Wednesday? Okay, just wanted to make sure. All right. Yeah, questions for Representative Harrelson on the bill? Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First question is this necessary, and can the governor already access and use these funds?
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chair Duncan. So the answer to that is yes, this is necessary. We put the guidelines on it. It was just for other states. So if a state breach commerce clause, that we could use this fund. And if it wasn't to bring suit against another state, it could not be used. And that's how it was described to me by the governor's office. And when LSO drafted it originally for me, those were the confines I put on it.
Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, when we originally did this enactment for the original money, it was the purpose of litigation against some states to the west of us that were preventing us from reaching a port. And it was trying to entice our governor and AG's office to proceed with some litigation or to try to open that up so we could export coal. Have they not pursued that at all in the interim?
Go ahead,
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Heiner. Actually, this wasn't for coal port litigation. This was actually originally intended for the state to the south of us and a overreach that they did on an entity. I'm not going to use anything proper. One of our organizations that we.
You're okay in that.
Okay, Tri-State Energy.
Yeah. As long as you're not derogatory, that's fine.
I'm usually never not derogatory in my life. Tri-State Energy had a portfolio requirement coming out of Colorado that would require them to have a certain number of renewables in their portfolio by a certain date. And that would have direct impact or effect upon the power plant in my county. And so that's where this was kind of the brainchild was birthed. We threw in there coal exportation as well to try open the boundaries. Now that situation where we had that port, that company originally wanting to bring or export our coal out went bankrupt before the litigation could follow itself through. So we were able to see, sadly enough, that process come to a bit of a halt. So no, we haven't at this point. There's no reason to continue. They didn't want to bring that into coal port litigation. There's already money set aside for coal port litigation. This would more be based upon power generation.
Okay. Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple questions, if I might. I'm on page 2, line 10. It says, or third parties that impermissibly impede Wyoming's ability. I guess I'm a little confused on how a third party impermissibly impedes Wyoming's ability. If you could give me an example or an explanation.
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead.
Representative Burkhart, thank you very much. So an example of that, I mentioned a little bit earlier, but regional haze, the NOx concept, we had the coal fire power plants in my county had to install or was required to install SCRs or a SCR in regards to the regional haze. And this was brought as a suit from a third party, which in turn turned into a multi-billion-dollar project in our county on a product that yet has not been fully vetted nor tested out. And that suit brought forward the requirement for our coal-fired power plant to shut its unit down for almost a year to install an SAR in regards to regional haze for the state. It would be to the northeast of us, and a third-party suit that was brought because of it.
Follow up. Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And then I'm on line 15, 16, closure coal-fired electric generation facilities that use Wyoming coal. Is the idea here to go after say a coal-fired power plant in Illinois that burns Wyoming coal that says we're going to retire the plant 10 years early, to sue them over that? Because that's the way I read this, that we're going to go out of state and sue companies to continue to burn Wyoming coal. What if the company says, well, we've decided we want to more efficiently burn West Virginia coal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Burkhardt. From my college days, we can't more efficiently burn West Virginia coal, but I'm also a sub-bituminous coal guy. So my goal and the goal of this was never to affect power plants outside of our state. Now, I would see how that could be interpreted that way. And that might be something that needs to be fixed or amended. But our goal is just for coal fire generation facilities in the state that burns the coal that we mine in this state.
Okay, Representative Duncan, has a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that just brought up a question. So this is also, the way I'm reading it then now, is that maybe we can sue the power companies within Wyoming who decide to go with natural gas instead of coal or to some other source.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Duncan. So I believe at this point, I mean, yeah, that is something that probably could be pushed through to this. One of the things you need to realize is when we're talking about electrical generation in the state due to coal fire, a lot of what we're dealing with is going to be regulated by the consumer if it's a co-op based. And so what we're trying to do, and the goal or the vision behind this, is to protect that co-op from having to retire or mothball a facility before its time due to the fact that it is coal fire, or bring a facility into, I'm going to use a topic word, nuclear or natural gas before its time. Now, obviously, there are coal-fired power plants that have ran their course. They physically cannot continue to move forward as a coal-fired power plant due to the fact that they may be 60, 70 years old and they've ran out their useful life. But it's completely different whenever we are having to shut down coal-fired generating facilities that are not at the end of their useful life, that are just being shut down due to regulation's sake.
That is a good wrap up. That's good. Yep. Okay. Any further questions? All right. So we're going to go ahead and continue this hearing. So we'll be in here 8 o'clock on Wednesday. This will be our first item up. I think we've got a couple more bills that we can hear afterwards. Appreciate if you came back, Representative, and then everybody here said they could be back Wednesday. So, okay. Well, with that, committee, we'll again carry this forward till Wednesday, and we'll adjourn and go upstairs and have some fun.